little ones, the Sleep Manual Podcast.
Welcome back to our podcast, The Sleep Manual. I'm Amanda, and this is Nikki.
Hi.
And we are pediatric sleep consultants and the founders of Little Ones. So far, we have helped over 300,000 families all around the world with their baby and toddlers' sleep over the last 7 years, and we're here if you need a hand too. Simply visit us at little.ones.co and we can get started on solving your sleep challenges. Today on the podcast, we are talking you through how to get your baby to sleep.
Yes, this is a pretty important topic. It's one thing to know all about the intricacies of sleep and why it's important, etc. But how do you actually get your baby to go to sleep? We'll talk you through all the steps you need to take to ensure your little one goes to sleep easily and sleeps well. So let's dive in, Amanda.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty underrated topic when you're pregnant. You don't even realize that babies need a hand to go to sleep. Yeah, we're going to go through making sure they're ready for sleep, what their sleep environment should be, a wind down routine, how to settle your baby if they need a hand, settling babies when they're older, because this is even more different when they become a little bit more or a little less pliable. And then troubleshooting. So what we should do if they don't go to sleep and how to make the rest of your day not turn into a disaster. So maybe Nikki wants to start us off in making sure they're ready for sleep.
Yeah, step one, making sure they're totally ready for sleep. And this is the most important thing every single time.
Yeah.
So none of the other stuff matters if this is not achieved. If your baby or your toddler is not completely ready for sleep, they will not go to sleep, basically, no matter what you do. So what we mean by totally ready for sleep is that they are the right amount of tired to fall asleep easily and to have enough sleep at that point. And this is...
It's true for everyone.
Babies and toddlers of all ages, but it's just different depending on the age of your baby or toddler. So we're talking here about how long your baby or your toddler can stay awake for, so you really need to know what the maximum amount of time is that they can stay awake for, because if you're well under that limit, then your baby's just not tired enough to fall asleep, and they're not going to fall asleep because they're just not tired. If you're over that limit, then they're overtired, and actually the exact same thing is going to happen. It's going to be impossible to get them to go to sleep.
Or if they're undertired, then a young baby might go to sleep but not sleep for very long. They'll just have a tiny little cat nap and then be like, I'm done. But you actually want them to have a sleep rather than just a tiny little nap.
Yeah, that's right. This actually happened to me with my second, with Max. I was so determined to not have him get overtired like my eldest did.
Yeah.
That I was trying to put him to bed as a newborn baby way too soon. Like, he actually needed some more awake time, and I was just so caught up in, I didn't think there was such a thing as undertired, so I would put him in and he'd just lie there wide awake for an hour, not going to sleep, no matter what I did. I mean, he wasn't upset, but it was very frustrating.
Well, but this is where you can end up putting in, inadvertently adding in sleep associations and thinking, oh my gosh, they need to be asleep. It's been 45 minutes or it's been an hour, and start rocking them to sleep. And then that's how they learn to go to sleep. I did the same thing with my first, and trying not to get her overtired. And at 8-9 weeks old, I was still trying to put her to bed after an hour because I had read some advice that said that they needed to go to sleep after an hour when they're a newborn. And that in a newborn in that book was up to 12 weeks old. But knowing what we know now, it is just so wrong that a 9-week-old needs to go to sleep after an hour. So
that's right. And this is why they're not falling asleep.
And this is why we have little ones.
Yeah. So making sure that your baby that you're hitting those exact awake times so that they're not overtired or undertired, because if they're overtired, as I experienced the first time around, they're going to be difficult to settle to sleep because they've got so much cortisol in their body. They're fighting sleep, and then if you do get them to sleep, they're not sleeping very well.
Yeah.
Also, when you're making sure they're totally ready for sleep, you're going to make sure that they have a full tummy.
Yep.
And that they are well winded, and especially for younger babies, wind is really going to sabotage your sleep. We always advise to feed your little one when they wake up from their nap, not right before their next nap, and that is for a couple of reasons. And one is so that they are refreshed and they're ready to take a really good, decent feed at that time. They're not getting really tired and falling asleep halfway through the feed because they're tired. The other reason is that it gives you enough time to get all that wind up.
Yeah.
So during that awake period, you can wind them multiple times to make sure, because honestly, they will need to burp more than you think they will. And it's really going to sabotage that sleep. So assuming that you've got the awake times perfectly right, and also linked to the awake times is making sure they haven't already napped too much that day. Because if they've already had too much sleep at their previous naps, they're never going to go to sleep for the next nap. You're making sure they're full, and you're making sure that they don't have any trapped wind. And then, and only then, are they perfectly ready for sleep. And this is where you can start taking these next steps. Step number 2, Amanda, what's our next move?
So our next move is making sure the sleep environment is very conducive of good sleep. So especially for those newborn babies, they're used to their environment being loud. They've been in the womb in a loud environment. So those newborns they will sleep best if there is white noise playing. You can use just plain white noise, or for newborns, we do recommend using a shh sound. We do have our own shush track available on all the streaming platforms if you need it, and to play that sound during the entire time that they're asleep. It is actually magic, and what will end up happening is
so
your baby will start settling or start calming down as soon as they have that sound. And we'll talk about part of the wind down routine, because they'll learn that sound and understand that sleep approaching and start to calm and just drift off to sleep. And then what happens is they learn that as their sleep association, and when they wake, if the noise is still playing, they'll go back to sleep as well. So the next part is making sure the room is super dark. We go on about this all the time, but a dark is best. We all have a nap in a dark room. I don't see many adults trying to go to sleep and have a nap in a bright sunlit room. Think about that, making sure the room is dark, blackout blinds if you can. Otherwise, there are some great temporary options that you can put up if you're renting or don't want to have a permanent dark room. And they will grow out of this. They will be able to go to sleep as a 5 or a 7-year-old in a lighter room. It's not something that you have to do all the time, although we do recommend you do it all the time.
It's not going to have negative effects. It's only ever going to help and improve their sleep.
That's right. Part of the dark room is also meaning that there's nothing distracting in the room. There's no musical mobiles, no toys, no projectors on the roof, any toys in their crib. All of those things are for awake times, and that's great, but those things are not going to help your baby sleep. Especially as like a toddler gets older, or a baby gets older and becomes a toddler, are going to play with those things because they can push through a little bit more.
Why wouldn't they?
Yeah. Next is swaddles or a sleeping bag. Swaddles for those newborns and those babies that are not rolling. Making sure they're tightly wrapped or in a fitted swaddle if they don't like being really tightly wrapped. Fitted swaddles are fantastic, makes it easier for you to change your baby if you need to, but they do sleep better when their arms are not flailing around.
Yep.
Then as your baby gets older, obviously a sleeping bag, because as we've talked before about the room environment in one of our other podcasts, babies just can't deal with blankets. They are potentially dangerous too, so having that sort of sleeping bag strapped on them or buttoned on them, when they move around,
reminds me of the jetpack.
Yeah. So when they move around, their blankets follow them, obviously. And you will find your baby in the most weirdest positions, like legs up, sleeping with their legs up on the crib, sleeping down the other end. So this is where those sleeping bags are super important.
Yeah. So it's really important that where you're putting your baby to sleep, so their sleep environment is going to help them go to sleep, not hinder them. And all of those things Amanda has talked about is, like we said with the dark room, it's not ever going to make it worse.
No.
It's only ever going to make it better.
Yeah. So do you want to talk us through step 3, Nikki?
On. I would love to. So step 3, so once you've got them really ready for sleep, the sleep environment is spot on, you need to have a little wind down routine. And this is, we might call it a bedtime routine, because certainly it's so incredibly helpful to have a bedtime routine before bed in the evening for your little one. But we would also recommend having a wind down routine before their naps as well, just a mini version of the bedtime routine. And especially for toddlers, if you're trying to get that one sleep a day still, and toddlers are notorious for their FOMO and something else is going on, they want to be involved in it and they don't want to be going to their room and going to sleep. Yanking your toddler out of a play situation and chucking them in their room for a nap is never going to help them go to sleep. So having a wind down routine is really valuable. And this can be an extended version in the evening. You would want a more prolonged bedtime routine, but a little short one for their daytime naps is perfectly fine. So what that might look like is obviously changing their diaper, or in your toddler, getting them to go to the toilet. You're going to pop them into their swaddle or their sleeping bag. So obviously you're in their room now. You'll turn their lights off so their sleep space is really dark. Put the white noise on, and Amanda said almost as soon as young babies hear that sound on, you almost watch their eyes start to go droopy immediately. They're like, oh yeah, it's sleep. It's like the second I get my jammies on, and after dinner, the kids, you get all the kids to bed and tidy up, and then I always just can't wait to get my jammies on. And as soon as my jammies are on, then it's almost like you just breathe this big sigh of relief. You're like, oh yeah, it's time to relax. It's like wind down time. And that's what it's like. And we want it to be like for our little ones. So they hear that white noise. They're all snug in their swaddle or their sleeping bag. At this point, read them a story or sing them a lullaby. And if you're doing a bedtime routine in the evening, you can do a couple of stories. Or if you have a toddler, it'll be about 5,000 stories. Or a couple of lullabies, or whatever you want to put into your little routine there. You pop them in their bed and you say a sleep phrase. We always encourage people to have a sleep phrase. And that's just a little sentence that you say every single time. It's bedtime now, darling, or go to sleep, darling, or something like that. And you say it every time they go to bed, and they really quickly associate that phrase with sleep coming next. Even if you're trying to get your little ones to nap during the day, having a small version of this routine is really valuable. You're just, again, it's never going to make it worse.
No.
So why wouldn't you do it? Because it's only ever going to help. So then once they're in there, they're all wound down, and for some of our babies, Amanda, we need to still actively settle them to sleep, especially those younger babies.
Yeah. So
how are we going about this?
So younger babies may need to be settled fully to sleep. Now, we're talking babies under 12 weeks old here. In saying this, if you've got everything lined up, I would, and I did, still always give them the chance to go to sleep by themselves.
For sure. Because you just never know.
Yeah, you just never know. And honestly, with my two, it was maybe about 50-50. I would put them in their bed, they would be perfectly winded, be perfectly ready for sleep, do all of the things that we've talked about, and then I would put them in the bed, and 50% of the time they'd go to sleep by themselves. And I'm talking about going to sleep too, generally at this point, without crying or with a little wind down grizzle. But I've put them in their bed, I've gone to the toilet or something, and they've gone to sleep, and I haven't let them cry for hours on end.
What you and I found too is that their ability to go to sleep like that by themselves when they were young also depends on what nap of the day it is.
Yeah.
Like that first morning nap is always the easiest one. So
yes, that's
I wouldn't
true.
mind betting that one was always quite easy for our kids to do, whereas the last late afternoon nap of the day,
it can be all sorts of problems there.
The ones, yeah, that's where you really need to actively, because they have to have that sleep, but that's the one that they're going to fight.
So I would give them the chance to go to sleep. If they then weren't going to sleep after a set amount of time, or say you've gone to the bathroom and come back and they're still not going to sleep, then yes, this is especially for these under 12-week-old babies. At that point, they actually need to go to sleep. So this is where I would side settle. We've got loads of information about side settling on our website. So this is where I would roll my daughter onto her side and then actively and quite strongly pat her bottom vigorously, because remember, they do have a diaper on. It's not like you're hitting them, and like you're essentially jiggling them in their bed, much like what you would do if you were rocking them to sleep, but you're doing it in their bed, side settling them until they're asleep, and then pop them back on their back for safe sleep. That's the way that we would recommend doing for a younger baby.
Let's just say that the beauty of that is that they are falling asleep in their bed.
That's right. And
so you're still hands-on settling them, which some babies definitely need that at this age, but they're starting to learn and associate that they go to sleep in their bed, and their bed is the place for sleep, which comes in really handy later on.
That's right. And even with my two, were side settled when they needed to be. If something was wrong, or if they were sick, or if they were overtired when they were an older baby, if I did have to actually actively settle them for some reason, I could still side settle them because they knew that was how they went to sleep. So the other options are you could rock them on your shoulder when they're really little and or feed to sleep, but making sure that if this is becoming a problem when they are older than 12 weeks old, that you're aware of that, because that can become a problem. But again, we would always recommend to give them the chance to fall asleep in their bed by themselves first, because that will just mean so much when you get over that 12 to 16 week mark, when they do need to be able to go to sleep by themselves.
We always have to say, because younger babies just cannot handle too much awake time. An older baby you can push through sometimes, but an older baby, if you reach that maximum awake time and they're not asleep yet, then you're about to be in for a world of pain. So you have to get them to sleep however you can.
Yeah.
So start settling them a good 15, 10 minutes before
they need to be asleep.
Yeah, they need to be asleep by, so that they're definitely asleep at that point, because otherwise you are... Yeah,
it's not
minutes
can
good. Make a difference at this age. Yeah, it's not going to be fun.
Not going to be fun. And other ways of getting other things that you can think about are the 5 S's, which is swaddling, sucking, your shush. So you've got your swaddle, maybe they've got a dummy or a pacifier. You've got your shush, which is the white noise, then your side settling, or you could swing or sway, which is if your side settling in the bed is not working, and that's where you can rock them to sleep in your arms, and then maybe finish settling them in their bed. Yeah, so that's for younger babies. Now Nikki's going to talk us through older babies, because they are a different kettle of fish.
Different kettle of babies.
Yeah, kettle of babies.
So, yeah, like Amanda said, the thing about younger babies is, they have to sleep.
Yeah.
You have to get them to sleep. So sometimes there does come a point where you go, okay, I just have to settle you to sleep now. But also they're a lot easier to get to sleep.
That's true. And if we think about the 80-20 rule, which is another thing we always go on about, but if you're having to settle your baby 20% of the time, that's totally fine even for older babies. But if 80% of the time you're giving them the chance and trying to get them to settle,
then perfect.
Then great.
But yeah, so they are generally a lot easier to settle to sleep. What you will find with your older baby, and we're talking 4 to 6 months and onwards, is that if they are not going to sleep and they're used to you doing something to settle them to sleep, then that is why they're not going to sleep.
Yeah.
So with these babies, it's probably not going to work to get everything lined up for sleep and just chuck them in their bed if they're used to you rocking or feeding or doing something to get them to sleep, because that's for the last 6, 8, however long, many months of their life, that's how they've learned to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So for these babies, you really need to work on self-settling. We have another podcast about that. We've got a ton of information about that on our website as well, because that is the best way to get babies of this age to go to sleep, is they need to learn how to do it now.
Yeah.
What you will also find is often the older your baby is, almost the harder they are to settle, because they start seeing you as entertainment. I remember some days, even if my kids were sick or something was going on or they were overtired, and I would think, oh, just settle them to sleep, they would just resist. Like, they were not going to sleep, because they're like, oh, Mum, I can pull your hair and I can clap my hands and show off for you. And it's very different trying to settle an older baby. So your best line of defense is to teach them to settle themselves.
Yeah.
But the very first place you have to start is getting everything ready for sleep, as we've talked about. Making sure they're ready, making sure the sleep environment is spot on. And then you can work on self-settling for those older babies, which means that you will be able to just pop them in their bed and walk away and they will fall asleep. What happens, Amanda? Let's troubleshoot. What if they don't go to sleep? We've all been there. What if your baby just doesn't and just goes, nah?
All right, so if they don't go to sleep with younger babies, if you are armed with the knowledge of knowing what the awake times are and what the maximum sort of awake time is, then, and you're past that awake time, do anything to get them to sleep for those younger babies, because otherwise you will end up with an overtired baby, and that then means your baby may catnap, they won't sleep very long, then your whole day is going to be out. It will just be a disaster. And you potentially end up with a witching hour and all sorts of things, and then an unsettled day means an unsettled night. So
that's right.
You don't want that. So for those younger babies, basically, if they're past their maximum awake time, you do anything you possibly can.
Yeah, literally anything.
To get them to sleep. Older babies, Nikki's already talked about what you're going to do is work on self-settling. If it is okay to stretch out that nap time during self-settling while they're learning how to go to sleep, they can actually deal with a little bit of overtiredness here whilst they're learning the skill of going to sleep. But if you're consistent, it should only be a couple of days, and then everything will become a lot easier and a lot better after those first few days.
Yeah.
So if they fell asleep too soon in their awake time...
Yes. That can definitely happen for younger babies.
Yeah, so try and wake them up if they're obviously just gone to sleep, and maybe take off an extra layer and keep them a little bit cooler so they're not all snuggly and warm, and
want to stay
asleep. Because if they do go to sleep, we've talked about this, if they do go to sleep before they're really ready to go to sleep, they'll only have a short nap, then you'll be stuffed for the rest of your day again. And that's just catnap, and they really do need some long, decent chunk of sleep. So if you're out and about, you can try and replicate the sleep environment that you've got at home. You can take a portable white noise, or I even just used to play white noise on my phone and put my phone on airplane mode. You can make it dark, have the stroller or pram covered with a blanket or covered with blackout shade cover. If you're out and about and you're only doing sort of the afternoon nap, and maybe it's only a short one sleep cycle nap, then totally do it in the front pack or a front carrier, because they don't necessarily need as much sleep there. And this is where that jiggling and rocking and going to sleep that way in the front pack is totally fine. But again, 80-20 rule. Only do it 20% of the time. Yeah.
We get asked this quite a lot, all the time.
Yes,
actually.
all the time.
Especially for these younger babies, if your baby can't handle that much awake time.
Yes, what can happen is if your baby, for some reason, has been napping loads during the day, but then having a really wakeful night overnight, they can be genuinely tired during the day because they're tired from the nighttime, sleeping poorly. That can mean that they don't want to stay awake for very long during the day. But what we need to do here is we need to stretch them out by 5 minutes every couple of days to stretch out that awake time, so that then they start putting that sleep time overnight instead, and then your nights will become better. So stretch them out slowly, making sure... What is also quite common here is that if someone's got, say, a 9-week-old baby like you were talking about earlier, and the baby's used to a 1 hour awake period, and they're taking our advice and stretching out that awake time to, say, closer to 2 hours, and obviously we don't necessarily advise doing that all in one go cold turkey, because your baby's not used to it. No.
That situation will occur as well, where if you're making a big change to your little one's awake periods, and they need to have a few days to recalibrate. But like Amanda said, just stretch them out bit by bit, take them outside, change their activity, take their diaper off, do something to keep
tummy
them
time
going.
Or
to keep them closer to that awake period.
Yeah. And look at your feed times too. Don't feed them right before the nap, when they're in that sort of sleepy mode, because that will almost guarantee to make them sleepy and fall asleep because they are sucking and they're nice and snuggly and warm. Look at those feed times as well, for sure.
And what, Amanda, if they just won't sleep, no matter what you do, you've done all of this stuff we've talked about, and your little one is just not going to sleep, what would that indicate?
If your baby is all of a sudden just started not going to sleep and you're generally following some sort of routine or program, or you know that your baby is generally pretty good at sleep, this can mean for sure that something is going wrong, something is going on. Maybe they're sick, maybe they're hungry, maybe their diaper needs to be changed, maybe they've got wind, those sorts of things. This was my number one indicator for my children whenever they had ear infections, because they had 1,000 of them, but they would start not settling very well, because my first had ear infections right from 2 months. But even in that 7 o'clock p.m. at nighttime, they wouldn't go to sleep, and then they would wake after one sleep cycle. They'd be awake, and when usually they'd sleep for the night there. So you can see if they're unsettled, they're not sleeping very well. Then if you've tried to settle them to sleep and they're still not going to sleep, that's when maybe have a look back on the past couple of days before as well, and just go, that happened here and there, and
look for the pattern
and just understand that maybe they're actually getting sick, because babies get sick all the time.
That about sums it up for this episode then of how to get your baby to sleep. Just as a quick recap, what you are going to do is make sure they are totally ready for sleep. Get those awake windows and nap length sorted, that they're full, that they're winded. You're going to look at their sleep environment, and we're looking at things like white noise, dark room, and that swaddle or baby sleeping bag. Have a nice wind down routine for your baby, and then either actively settle them to sleep in their bed or guide them towards self-settling. But in every situation, you're going to give them the chance to put themselves to sleep first.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to us today about how to get your baby to sleep. Please check out our other podcasts for so much more sleep advice, and visit our website, little-ones.co. If you're in need of more help with your baby settling, their naps, or their nighttime sleep. This is Little Ones, the Sleep Manual Podcast.